The toolkit is divided into 4 chapters to take you right through the full programming cycle for preventing violent extremism programs, from design, implementation to evaluation and learning. It's important to remember to ensure that you consider and you integrate conflict sensitivity and gender sensitivity at every stage of your program cycle. The toolkit is underpinned by 9 principles of good practice to ensure that you develop a robust and impactful program that responds to the needs of the context. The first principle is around defining terms. Definitions of PVE and of VE vary context to context, and there isn't always a shared understanding of this. So ensure that across your project team, with partners and stakeholders, you have a clear understanding of the problems that the project is aiming to address and the approach that the project is taking. The second principle is around setting a level of ambition and ensuring that in your project goals, your theory of change, and in your monitoring and evaluation framework, that you set feasible and realistic targets and indicators for measurement. Given the short programming cycles that PVE programs are often faced with, what is desired isn't always feasible in the time frame. The third principle is around ensuring that you integrate a nuanced understanding of gender within your program. This goes beyond disaggregating data, which is really important, but also thinking about what are the different risk factors, different experiences and perspectives of different men and women, girls and boys of different ages in that specific context, and how does that impact your design, your approach, and also what you need to measure in your context. The fourth principle is around building capacities and ensuring that you have adequate resources for monitoring and evaluation within your project. M&E for PVE can be particularly challenging, so it may be that you need to consider how to develop the capacities of monitoring and evaluation staff, or particularly of partners, so that they can collect and analyse the data that you need for your program. And it's also important to ensure that within your budget you have sufficient resources for the type of monitoring and evaluation that you want to do. The fifth principle is around integrating a culture of learning within the program. It's important to do monitoring and evaluation, but the data that you use for that isn't only for understanding your impact at the end of the project. It's about understanding how you are doing in the here and now and using that information to improve the program that you're doing. And it also helps to build and keep a shared understanding amongst project partners and stakeholders of what the program is trying to achieve and ultimately what it is achieving. The sixth principle is around do no harm and conflict sensitivity. The potential to do harm in a PVE context can be heightened. So it's really important to ensure that your monitoring and evaluation system is able to capture different changes in the PVE context and to capture any unintended consequences of the program during the program cycle, to help ensure that you aren't doing harm, but you're also building and supporting prevention efforts through implementation. The seventh principle is around targeting. Targeting for PVE programs is particularly challenging. On the one hand, targeting is difficult because it's not always easy to identify or access those who are potentially most vulnerable to VE or most affected by VE, or those who potentially have the most significant role in prevention. The eighth principle is around risk. Risk can be heightened in a PVE program, security risk, safety of staff and of those collecting data. Any monitoring and evaluation system needs to be able to monitor and assess risk during the program cycle, and also a project needs to have a system in place for managing that risk. And then the final, ninth good practice principle of the toolkit is that as long as you ensure that your programs are robust, facilitate learning, and give you the evidence that you need and generate the data that you need for your project, good enough is good enough.